In this video, we're going to look at Lesson 4 in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's English Composition course. So far in this course, we learned what a common problem is for modern writing courses, namely that students are asked to write about topics that they're not interested in. Second, we looked at 3 basic sources of ideas that we can develop and draw from in our writing, namely experience, imagination, and study or reading. And then in Lesson 3, we looked at the advantages of expressing ideas that are gained by experience. And in this 4th lesson, our topic of study is essentials of expression or rules of expression. So let's go ahead and read through Lesson 4, because at the end of this lesson, we have our first composition exercise. So in this video, we'll walk through the lesson together, and then I'll also walk you through that first composition exercise so you can get started and know what to do. All right, so Lesson 4, Essentials of Expression. We read, the proper expression of ideas depends upon the observance of 2 essentials. The proper expression of ideas depends upon the observance of 2 essentials, which become for us 2 rules of composition. Number 1, you should say what you mean. You should say what you mean. And number 2, you should say it clearly. You should say what you mean, and you should say it clearly. The 2 essentials of expression. Say what you mean and say it clearly. Without these, we read, what you say may not be only valueless or useless, but it may be positively misleading. So if you don't say what you mean, your reader can read something that you didn't intend, and ultimately, as a writer, that's your fault. You need to make sure that you write what you mean, and you make it so that it's not possible to read it and understand it in any way other than you intend it to be understood. You have to make sure that you write what you mean, and you have to understand how it can be understood by others and possibly misread. And you need to avoid those problems by making sure that you write exactly what you mean, or say exactly what you mean. So if you don't do so, your writing may be valueless, but even worse, it may be misleading. If you wish your hearer to understand what occurred at a certain time and a certain place, you must first of all know yourself exactly what did occur. If you want your hearer or your reader to understand something, you must first know that thing in clear detail. All right, so what you see is we're going to learn quickly that becoming a good writer and being skilled in composition has a lot more to do with studying and living and gathering information than it does with actually writing. The writing is easy if you have a treasury of ideas to draw from. If you don't have a good set of ideas, you're never going to be able to write, because you don't have anything to communicate. You don't have anything to share. You don't have ideas to share. And that's why you're going to struggle to write. And so we're always going to be brought back to gathering ideas, to improving our knowledge, to learning more, experiencing more, imagining things more carefully. The problem is not going to be writing. The problem is actually going to be thinking, okay? If you wish your hearer to understand what occurred at a certain time and place, you must first of all know yourself exactly what did occur. then you must express it in language that will make the reader understand it as clearly as you do. See, let's take experience, since at this point in the course we're focused on experience. Say you take a trip to the zoo, and you're at the zoo. It's a certain zoo in maybe in your state where you live. So that zoo would be different from a zoo that I've seen. And you walk around that zoo and you see all the sights that are there, see the animals and all the different displays that are in the zoo. But you're looking at a zoo that's different from what I'll see when I go to the local zoo in my state. And so if you simply say, I went to the zoo, your reader is going to think about a zoo based on their own experience and their own ideas. And you have to realize that your reader or the person you're speaking with is not going to think and have the ideas in his mind when you say zoo that you have in your mind. You have to create that scene. You have to not only have the experience and gather all of those ideas and images and sights and sounds, but when you communicate about them, when you speak or write about them, you have to think about those ideas clearly. You have to realize that they're not necessarily in the mind of people that you're communicating with, and you need to speak about them clearly. That's what the author is getting at here. You must express in language that will make the reader understand as clearly as you do. You have to provide that description and detail to make sure that the ideas shared are actually the same ideas that you're beginning with, the same ideas that were gathered from your experience. You're going to share them and send, as it were, the same ideas into the mind of your reader or the person you're speaking with. As in composition, that's your responsibility to do that. Not just say, I went to the zoo, and think that the people you're talking to are picturing what zoo means in your mind, in their own mind. All right? You need to speak about things clearly and make your readers or hearers understand them as clearly as you do. You will learn much about clearness later in this course, but even now, you can tell whether you know what is meant by each sentence you hear or read. It is not so easy to tell whether what you say will convey clearly to another the meaning you intend to convey, but you will be helped in this if you ask yourself these questions. So it's difficult to communicate and make sure that we say what we wish to say clearly. It's difficult to do that. And that's one of the challenges of composition. But one helpful thing that this course provides is every time you have a writing exercise or some composition exercise to complete, you're provided with questions to ask that will help you to judge whether or not you've done well, whether you need to redo it or improve it, or whether you've satisfied the purpose and the goal of the exercise. So here in this lesson, we're given 3 questions that we should ask when we speak or write about something to make sure that we know it clearly ourselves and that we communicate it to others as clearly as we ourselves understand it. So 3 questions to ask. Ready? Number 1 is, do I know exactly what happened? Do I know exactly what happened? Second, have I said what I intended to say? Or have I said what I want the reader to understand? And have I said it in a way that can't be misunderstood? Have I spoken it clearly so that what the reader understands is actually what I meant to communicate? And then thirdly, Have I said it so that it will be clear to the listener? Have I said it so that it will be clear to the listener? Not clear to me, but clear to the listener. That's a different challenge. Many people, when they say something and others object and say, oh, well, I didn't understand what you said, or I thought you meant, they'll say that's your problem. But actually, that's false. That's the writer's problem. That's the speaker's problem. If the speaker is communicating, either in speech or in writing, he takes upon himself the responsibility of communicating in a way that can't be misunderstood and that's clear to the people whom he's speaking with. All right? So 3 questions. Do I know exactly what happened? If I don't, I may need to think about it some more. I may need to make an outline. I may need to go back and look through my photos. I may need to go back and look at my journal entries for that day when I did that, and remind myself of the details. Do I know exactly what happened? Do I remember exactly what happened? Do I know what I'm talking about? Have I studied this before I attempted to write or speak about it? That's the first question. Do I know exactly what happened? Second, have I said what I intended to say? And third, have I said it so that it will be clear to the listener? So 3 questions that we're to ask to help us with these 2 essentials of expression. Say what you mean and say it clearly. Say what you mean and say it clearly. Those are the 2 essentials of expression. Say what you mean and say it clearly. And the way that we can make sure that we're satisfying these essentials of expression is by asking ourselves these 3 questions. Do I know exactly what happened? Have I said what I intended to say? And have I said it so that it will be clear to the listener? Okay? That's the content of lesson 4, essentials of expression. 2 essentials, 2 important rules for our communication, and 3 questions that we can use to test and judge whether or not we're expressing ideas as we should. All right, so that's the content of lesson 4. Now, I said in lesson 4, we have our first composition exercise. All right. Our first composition exercise, and if you think back to lesson 1, what the author of this book explained that was very helpful is that speaking is very pleasant. We like to talk. In fact, most of us err in talking too much because talking is pleasant. So when we learn about composition, it's a good idea to begin orally, to begin by speaking rather than writing, because as I said in our first lesson, really all writing is writing down what we would say. Okay, so these first composition exercises that we do in this course are actually not going to be written. They're simply going to be oral. So you're really preparing to say something on a topic that's given to you. And the topics, remember, we said writing or speaking about topics you're not interested in is a bad idea. So the topics that you're given in these exercises are usually general. So you don't have to write about something you're not interested in. They always give you a number of different topics to choose from, and they're usually general so that you can find something interesting to say about one of the topics. But these first exercises we do, where we begin to practice composition, they're oral exercises. So there's nothing to write. And since, if you're working in a class, if you're working in a school or with other, maybe a brother or a sister who are also working in this course, you can do these as group exercises. And you can share these oral compositions in speech. But if you're working privately, studying in a self-paced online course, you can simply think about these things. Maybe talk about them with a parent who's working with you with your studies, and simply follow through the assignment that you're given, and make sure that you're thinking about the content of the lesson and that you're achieving what's being presented to you as the goal of your communication. So let's look at this first composition exercise. It says, report orally on one of the following. So this isn't a written report, this is an oral report. So if you were in a classroom, you'd stand in front of the class and share your report on one of these topics with your classmates. And as I said, if you're in a classroom, as some students who use CLA materials are, you can do this as a group in a classroom. You can do it as a homeschool student with your parents or with your siblings and present an oral composition to them just for practice, okay, as you get started in this course. Later on, we're going to move to writing, but to get started, oral composition is more helpful. It's more pleasant and it's easier to get started with. So no matter what situation you're in, you can find a way to complete this exercise. So what the first composition exercise asks is to report orally on one of the following topics. And it gives you 4 options to choose from. And you're only going to choose one. All right, so here are the 4 topics. Were you so interested in anything yesterday or any day? Were you so interested in anything that you told it to your parents or friends? Tell the class about it. Tell the group about it. Tell about it, okay? Tell whoever you're with, tell about it. Was there something that you were so interested in yesterday or at any time in the past that you told it to your parents or your friends? Tell it to someone else. Tell it to your class. Tell it to your family. Okay, that's topic number 1. Number 2, tell about something that you have done this week so that the group may know exactly what you did. And remember, this is an exercise that's allowing us to practice communicating about ideas from our experience. Okay? The second topic was tell about something you have done this week so that the class or a group or your family or a parent or a sibling may know exactly what you did. Third topic is name some things in which you have been interested in within the last 2 or 3 months. Name some things in which you've been interested in within the last 2 or 3 months. Tell the class or group or your family or someone about them, about one of them. And then fourthly, tell the class or group about something that happened during a vacation. Tell the class about something that happened during a vacation. And then ask, have you told the event exactly as it occurred? So 4, as you see, 4 general topics that are easy to find something interesting to talk about. And the goal is simply to practice sharing your experiences, communicating clearly and definitely about something that you've experienced. Remember the 2 essentials of expression. Have something to say and say it clearly. And then ask the 3 questions. Do I know exactly what happened? Have I said what I intended to say? And have I said it so that it will be clear to the listener? In this first composition exercise, you're simply going to share on one of these topics with someone, whether it's a class or a group or your family or your parent or a sibling, anyone, on one of these 4 topics. But you're not so much concerned about getting a grade or anything like that. You're simply beginning the process of composing and communicating and judging the quality of your own composition and communication by asking these questions about it. All right? Do I know exactly what happened? Have I said what I intended to say? Have I said it so that it's clear to the listener? Learning to think like one who is composing is the beginning of how to improve your art and skill in composition and writing. Okay, so Complete this first oral composition exercise. As I said, there's no grade for it or anything like that. It's simply an exercise to get you started thinking about the act of composition and communication, evaluating or judging yourself, and beginning to notice problems that you have, whether this is easy or difficult, what makes it difficult, what are you good at, what are you not good at. Is there something you struggle to communicate? Is there something that makes it difficult for you? Just beginning to experience the challenges of composition and paying attention to the process of thinking and preparing, choosing a topic, and then having something to say, and then saying it clearly. Okay, just that process in composition. We want to start thinking of it. We want to start becoming a writer. We want to start thinking about writing, thinking about composing, and then as we continue our studies and continue our exercises and we actually begin to get into writing, you'll have already started this process of composition and thinking about the process and practicing the process so that when it comes time to write, you already have some experience and practice doing it. Okay, so complete that first composition exercise. Review lessons 1 through 4 so that you have all of that information in mind as you go about this composition exercise, and then we'll move on to the next one. And I think in lesson 8 we write our first theme, so we do our first written exercise in lesson 8. So as we're getting started here in lesson 4 with your first exercise, just pay attention to the content we've studied so far and complete this composition exercise thoughtfully, thinking not only of the topic, not only of the person that you're speaking to, but also think about the whole process itself. Think about yourself as the one composing and speaking, and begin to examine yourself as a writer and speaker. And we're going to continue to develop these skills as we go on. So I hope that's helpful through lesson 4 of English composition, and also getting started with your first oral composition exercise. If you need any help or have any questions about these things, please contact me. I'm happy to help. God bless your studies.